Cool.
All right, Joe, welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you coming on. If you're nervous, I promise you I can make it as awkward as possible if need be.
That's perfect. Yeah. Yeah, that'll work. Let's do that.
We can do this office style where we just say the
Yeah.
most out of pocket things and then,
hmm
turn everything into a joke.
If
But
they were waterboarding, I wouldn't even work because by the time they get to the water, I'm just eating the rag.
yeah, that's some office level espionage.
This thing on. All right.
Can you
Yeah,
hear me?
let's do this. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I have briefly met you on a couple of sets, but it was mostly in passing because it was
Yes.
with sets that where you were not the DP and you were assisting
Yeah, I
the
was just
DP.
gaffing.
Yeah, you were just gaffing. But as of lately, you've been picked up to do at least a couple of short films where you are running the cinematography. So if you would just go ahead and introduce yourself, how you got started, and how you got to at least the point now where people are approaching you for running their projects.
Gotcha. Okay. So I'm Joe Palmer. I'm a DP here in Cincinnati. Um, yeah, my road to get into this was a little weird. I came out of high school and applied for University of Cincinnati. I was trying to get into the industrial design program. Didn't get in, and so I was like, all right, guess we're just gonna take some gen eds our first year and try to get some stuff out of the way and just keep a good GPA and apply again. So the end of that came that first year, kept like a 3.9. I was like, all right, I can apply. I'm just gonna slide right in and applied again. Didn't get in again. I was kind of freaking out a little bit because I was like, well, I don't know what I want to do now. Like, I guess this isn't working. I can't just spend another year in school aimlessly. And so I just went through all of the courses and stuff to try to find something that sounded like something that'd be interesting to me. I knew it had to be something that was creative at least. And so I found e-media or digital media at UC. I was like, okay, this sounds cool. I love movies and TVs, always have. And I used to shoot little BMX videos for my friends 'cause that's what I did when I was younger.
Hmm.
I was like, that stuff's always been interesting to me. So, this can work. And then my buddy convinced me to join the Air Force. Um,
Good decision,
just,
bad
it's
decision.
just, I wanted, some guaranteed income out of college. And I was like, oh, this would be great. And then they're like telling me I could do the, Air Force ROTC at school and still do my other major.
Hmm.
Uh, and that there's, positions that I could fill in the Air Force where I'd still get to be doing video stuff. And I was like, yeah, that'd be sick. So, I'm doing my Air Force ROTC stuff along with my e-media stuff.
Okay.
And things are going pretty decently, pretty well. I'm putting off my physical for whatever reason. And so my first, like, I spent like, I guess like a year in the Air Force ROTC. And I finally get my physical stuff done. And like after I go to the doctor and they like talk about my medical history and stuff, and I'm like, uh, I had an accident when I was younger and like ruptured my spleen, so I was in the hospital for a month,
Okay.
and I like damaged my pancreas a little bit at the time too.
BMX involved, no doubt.
Yeah, it was on my bike, and yeah, and so I guess that medically disqualified me those previous injuries, even though I'm fine now.
Okay.
So got let go from the Air Force,
So how
and
long were you in the Air Force then, like officially?
so I wasn't officially in. I was just in the Air Force ROTC.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. Like,
so I guess it wasn't like officially like sworn in or anything at that point. But I was just in the classes and to the PT and all that fun stuff. Um, yeah, and then I just was kind of kicked out, and I was like, okay, well, there's another thing out the door that I thought I was gonna be doing, but just focus on the video stuff and became like really, really, really obsessed with cinematography and lighting and stuff. And every night I would just watch tutorials and search up behind the scenes from movies and stuff, and which I still do. most nights. And
Would you consider yourself a more
yeah,
techie guy or a more creative leaning in terms of your temperament?
I'd say more creative leaning. But I'm also, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to split between. I'm also like very, very technical when it comes to like lighting, for example,
Mm.
which is has led to me doing a lot of G&E work on the side when I'm not shooting. So
Has assisting with
yeah.
the gaffing aspect help fill in aspects of your schedule for when you're not, doing things on your own?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a great way to pick up extra money and still get to do creative stuff and work with the DP to come up with lighting setups and stuff. Like I work with Ben McLean a lot. He's
Mm-hmm.
probably my number one person I am, I guess, gaffing for.
Okay.
Um,
And then
yeah,
at that point, how did you first start plugging yourself into the scene, like Facebook groups and stuff like that? That tends to be the most common.
yeah. So I think I really started really getting into things with my first time trying Fright Film. If you're familiar with that
Yeah,
film
yeah, the
competition
film
or festival
festival.
thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I actually rented some two tube lights for a weekend from Ben McLean, and so I was just starting out, and yeah, and so I made this little horror film with some people I connected with online who were looking for a DP, and I was like, I could shoot this for you.
In hindsight,
Yeah.
do you like how do you see that first short film that you did in terms of looking back on what you could have done better?
Um, I was pretty proud of it for a minute. Like, I was like, it was like such a hard shoot. It was like 4 days with a bunch of different locations. Um, and a million things went wrong. So it was just kind of like a very, very, very tough shoot. But now looking back at it, I like there's lots of things I wish I had done a little differently, like whether it's like changing focal lengths that I chose for certain shots or adding certain shots in that I wish I'd done.
Okay. What was your first impression of like the local film community here in Cincinnati and upward toward Dayton and Columbus in terms of the people and the working dynamics of how they like to go about a project?
Yeah, so I guess my first kind of introduction to that like real sets was I got a little picked up a little PA job from a friend who shoots stuff, a little older guy, and so I got on my first like real set or whatever. And
It wasn't by chance
I,
Micah Sims, was it?
no, it was shoot, what was his name? Josh Emerson? Yeah, Josh Emerson. That was his name.
Rings a bell. I've probably seen it. It's probably popped up in my feed at one point.
But yeah, I think he doesn't do too much like narrative stuff
Because I
because
know
this was
Micah
like a
Sims
corporate type
has
shoot.
brought people on, like just underneath his wing, at least
Hmm.
for a project before. So like that's the first name that I thought of when you mentioned that.
Yeah, I've heard that name before. I don't think I've met him yet though.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so I noticed that everyone who was working together on the set, they all knew each other. I guess they were all, had clearly been in the industry for a while, and they're all very comfortable with each other and stuff. But it seemed like a very tight knit group. And then expanding past that little PA job, like getting into actually like working with people, it's been very cool. Just getting to work with your friends and stuff, and knowing how people work and their kind of workflow, and seeing how people mesh together on different aspects of different projects and stuff.
Okay. What was the first skill in cinematography that you feel like that you got down in the very beginning in order to actually start being that people started recommending you for? Because there's a correlation between your work and obviously the artist, and so there's what project would you say you were most proud of? Maybe it was the horror film. Maybe that was it, and it
Mhm.
just snowballed from there. But what was the first skill set that you picked up or decided to focus more on that you felt helped accelerate that snowball?
Okay. I think the first one I like really was diving into was lighting
Mm.
and figuring out how to make stuff kind of look like what you see in the movies or on TV that looks good. So trying to just figure out like what it is about those images that I'm like, yeah, that looks beautiful. It's so good, and seeing if I could like kind of try to replicate that. So yeah, that first that horror film I did, that was probably the first one that kind of started things snowballing, where people were like, yeah, this was really good. Like composition was awesome, lighting, and then um, I also tend to color my projects just because I guess a little bit. I just want to make sure that it's going to be done justice color wise, even though like I'm not like the best colorist or anything. But
Have you found that actually, some cinematographers, would you say that they're more inclined to do their own color, or at least have an understanding when it comes to color grading and color correction for the end product of when they're going to shoot?
yeah, yeah, for sure. Like especially like with people who are like people like I look up to in the industry or whatever, that I've had conversations with, have talked about, with like passion projects and all their projects starting out, they were the ones coloring them,
Hmm.
uh, because a colorist isn't really an expense you can justify when you're working on something with like no budget.
Right.
And
Yeah.
if you can trust yourself to like kind of do something decent with it at least, then that's a lot better than having someone who has no idea what they're doing just try to, throw a
Were you
love on
also
their.
approached to do some of the more post production aspects, related to the cinematography, when on these smaller budget productions?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm usually doing color if I'm shooting as well. And then also uh, editing, which I know I have a good kind of mind for pacing and stuff, which helped with the horror film. But I also don't enjoy like editing as much. Like I've done it a lot I was doing corporate jobs for a while, like a lot of corporate interviews and stuff. I didn't really like ever post about them or anything. It was just kind of like I need money and this is a good way to make some money.
When you first started, doing productions, because obviously those productions, they don't really have much of a budget,
Hmm.
as goes with indie film. How did you figure out how to adjust the variables with the what equipment you had available in terms of the lighting and as well as the gear in order to um, get the look that you wanted, or at least that you could achieve? Because there's like there's a version that you think, okay, this is what I'd like to have. This is what the scene needs, and then there's the balance of, well, here's what I actually have, and
Hmm.
then that balance right there is a whole art in and of itself. And can you talk a little bit more about the craft of just that balance right there?
Yeah, yeah. So definitely starting out when you have like very little access to lighting and stuff like that, you kind of just have to go in and think to yourself like, what is the what's the most I can do with these two lights I have, and maybe a softbox. Like okay, um, it's not like I know what I want to see in this image. Like I want a nice little like soft hair light or something, and I want a nice key that's like wrapping around the front.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't always get that obviously if you just only have like one or two lights to work with. So you just kind of got to decide what part of the image is most important for what you want to achieve, which is obviously usually a key light.
Mm-hmm.
And you just got to just run with it. And you can also a big thing I do also is kind of using practicals to give a little bit of a
Okay.
a bump to the image, or like trying to think of a way to explain it. I like having lamps and stuff in my shots. I love having
You start
them if they're
amalgamating
available.
all the other practicals that you might technically not supposed to have access to from other rooms that on the location, and you just
Yeah,
start kind of
yeah,
filling them in with the rest of the scene. You're like, okay,
exactly.
if nobody says anything, at least I can use them for the time being, and then we'll put them back before I even notice.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just stealing lamps from everywhere. Yeah, it's just Lamp City. I'm a moth. Yeah,
There's a lot of different personalities inside of the community, you know, and each
right.
have their own specific style of communication, their own terminology, often more often than not. How did you learn to adapt on the spot when it came to being able to communicate your thoughts on what should be done, and contrasting that with their thoughts of what should be done?
Okay. Yeah. So my big thing is I always try to add value to the project I'm on. Um, and if someone's wanting someone might like think they want something, and I hear what they're asking for, and I'm like, this isn't going to work. And so instead of just trying to shut them down immediately, I usually try to, come up with some sort of compromise where I can try to do something similar to what they're wanting, but that'll still work for our project and the time constraints we have and stuff and the equipment. Um, and also, people have different communication styles, and some people are, very blunt and straightforward, and um, some people are, a little less willing to just immediately ask for what they want, and they might not exactly know what they want. And so sometimes trying to help someone like that out by giving them options, like a couple options of what we can do, and then giving my recommendation on what we should do,
Mm.
is a good way that I found to navigate that sort of situation.
Are there any commonalities of what you have found directors are looking for when it comes to shot composition?
Honestly, no. I mean, everyone that I've worked with has been kind of different in what they like, and I mean, I have my own things that I really like doing that I try to, put into the project, and um,
Can you give an example?
like I love a good like high angle wide shot. I don't know why, just something that I always think looks real cool because it's
Kind of like
not
a
an
Grand
angle you
Theft
see.
Auto angle, looking at the character.
Yeah, just like on Creatures of Habit, for example. Like I got up on a table and put my tripod at max height up by the ceiling, looking down at him in the corner of the booth, and then you can kind of see the rest of the space in front of him. I don't know. I
There's
just
some commonalities with that and like how noir used to be shot.
yeah, yeah,
You know, they would throw a lot of not just Dutch angles, but they would put the subjects in either, various corners of the frame and then
yeah. Mhm.
litter the rest with wherever they were going to end up going, into the frame. And the they would fill the frame, I noticed, with all the props that they would end up moving towards, and they would be very efficient with their editing because it was very much like a fly on the wall type scenario, which kind of sounds me is what reminds me of that particular shot that you're mentioning of.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, just kind of fly on the wall from an angle that you maybe not are not used to seeing because your mind doesn't instantly go when you're trying to come up with composition. I mean, most people are kind of floating somewhere around
Hmm.
eye level or lower for the most part, from what I've seen.
The editing also is a really important part when you're going to shoot because you have to stitch all those little shots together. What are the
Definitely.
conversations between you and as a DP and the director for how you're going to shoot something, and it's going to end up in the edit?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm someone who always is thinking of how stuff is going to edit together when I'm coming up with like a shot list um, or on the day, figuring out how we're going to navigate a scene. And so I usually am trying to, like, I can just picture it in my head. You see how things are going to progress in the shot. It's kind of like a little movie in your head, how everyone does it, I guess. But
Hmm.
uh, yeah, so I just kind of see it playing out and kind of try to figure out what's going to logically work for moving from one part of a scene to the next. Like if there's camera movement that's necessary, or if we want to just keep things more static, that type of stuff. But I just kind of think about if it's going to be a weird jump between, one shot and the next and try to avoid that being too
Hmm. How
jarring.
has the editing, once you see the final product of what you shot, affected how you go to shoot the next project you end up on?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, one thing in particular, I guess, would be uh, like continuity errors. Is like it's even that's not like exactly maybe what you're asking about, but like that's something that I've started to try to think about more. I know even like if we have someone watching for that stuff, um, things get kind of missed, and like that's something I've noticed between going between different shots.
Mm.
Um, is just trying to make sure that continuity is correct, even though it's not necessarily my job. And then also going like watching an edit and seeing something from one shot to the next where it wasn't enough of a change in focal length or distance from the subject. And so it just kind of looks like a jump cut. And I hate that. So just kind of thinking to try to avoid that but even though I haven't really done that very much in my own projects, but I've seen it in other projects, and now I'm rambling a little bit.
Oh, no, you're good. My internet
Yeah,
connection just went off for a hot second. Okay, now you're back.
we are so back.
We are back. I'm testing it. I'm testing the connection again just to make sure. Okay. All right, that worked. Yep. Upload speed is back.
Sick.
I might be running on Ethernet, but I'm also running on Spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's tough.
it is. Because when I started this podcast, I'm like, I know there's going to be some internet connection troubles at least at one point. And this is like the second time it's happened, and you just got to work around it.
You know, these things happen. I've never been on a podcast, but I imagine these things happen.
Mm. I'm sure. I always wonder like what other people's podcast setup are, you know? And it's
Mm-hmm.
like how many safety nets do they have just to switch on a dime like that? But
Yeah.
most or at least a lot of podcasts, they end up it's usually in person, so the recording with
Mm-hmm.
cameras and everything. So there's not like a remote podcast.
Right.
It's like you got to make sure you got to do your best and just see what happens. But
Yeah. Do you
all
think
right,
you'll always stick with remote podcasts, or do you think you'll have like a little studio set up sometime?
um, remote for now. Maybe for the next
Heard.
year or two. Then because also I'm recording and I'm interviewing people from that have busy schedules along
Right.
the
Right.
rest of the sometimes other parts of the country.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then a remote podcast makes the most amount of sense. So at a certain point, it's like if for some reason it becomes a thing, then I'll
Mm-hmm.
do more in person. But like I'll have to see that transition first before I put more time and effort into going that route.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll go ahead and rephrase the question.
Sure.
Well, before I do that, actually, just tell me why cinematography ticks scratches your itch. Why not another aspect of the field like writing or directing? Or you seem a little too introverted for acting.
Introverted? That's funny. I don't think anyone who's ever met me would call me introverted. However, I don't know. That's funny.
I mean,
Oh,
on my brief impressions on my
that's
experiences with you,
fair.
where I haven't had a lot of interaction, then
Yeah,
that would be
on
my
set, I probably come off as more introverted if I'm just like working hard. So I could see it. I could see
yeah.
it. Yeah. So cinematography. I guess that one really scratches that itch in my brain because get I guess the whole like creative aspect of it, getting to decide the composition and the lighting, all this fun stuff, and having that kind of pressure, I guess, like when I'm working is good for me. I think it helps me focus and stay locked in. And when it like comes to like the final image and the edit and stuff, and if it looks really great, then it just feels so good. And I'm like, damn, I did that. Like that. Even though it's a mixture of everyone working together. But selfishly, like I'll say to myself, like kind of like, yeah, you did that. You're capable of making these kind of images. Like you can do this and it's gonna work. Yeah, I don't know. It's just
So
the
there
creative.
isn't another field that you think might scratch a different itch that you don't get with cinematography?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've like tried different stuff. I know directing is not for me, um, as well as like producing. Like I have no interest in being the person that logistically organizes everything and just it's too much for my brain to handle, I think. I'm just like focus on the image and the lighting and that stuff, which I guess is also a lot to think about, but
Well, there is a
I'm
shortage, at least on the indie level, of people who just produce. Normally, everybody has to wear
mhm,
a type of producer hat, like whether it be,
right.
the cinematographer, the director. Mainly, the director ends up wearing the producing hat because it's his
Hmm.
project normally that he wrote and he wants to direct, and he's got this vision, so he ends up having to do the most amount of work. Um, but I think another reason for that shortage is that, and I kind of learned this from Erica, or at least I picked it up from Erica Buck, is that
Cool lady.
yeah, she is that if you just produce, you really got to know who you're working with and if this product is
Hmm.
going to be worth all the effort you're going to be putting into it, because there's a lot of work that goes into producing. With DP writing or just directing, you're focusing on one job. A producer is making sure everybody that has a job is getting what they need, and
Hmm.
especially the director. And if you were to go off into producing for that reason, a lot of people who maybe don't make great quality work or don't even follow through. Sometimes there's a problem with indie filmmakers in following through on things. There's a lot of dreamers. There's not as many doers as there are dreamers, and so you got to be
Definitely.
really careful when it comes to who you give your time to, and
Hmm.
what kind of product that all of your effort's going to be going into. If it'll even pan out in the first place.
Yeah,
But
I think another thing is I feel like there's a lot of not that great writing out there.
think so.
Yeah, I mean, like obviously there's great writing out there as well, but a lot of people want to make something, and that's really cool. But a lot of them, I feel like, are also not as interested in hearing feedback on their writing, and I feel like that can make a project not that great very quickly.
Have you
And
been
then
on
I
a
think,
project where there was bad writing? You're like, I really got to pull through on the cinematography because they're not going to be listening to this thing.
uh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, those are the type of projects that I don't have as much interest in because, I mean, I could make it as beautiful as I can, but if like the writing's not good, then the acting's not going to matter.
Hmm.
And like it's all just shit. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss on this,
It doesn't matter.
but yeah. So then, yeah, and then I think about all the people in the background who've worked really, really hard to make this come to life, and for it to be a bad project in the end just kind of sucks. Especially if it's like a really low budget thing that people are just giving a bunch of their time for, then yeah, that kind of sucks. But
Hmm. Oh, gosh. Do you see that on your end?
see what?
1 second. Okay. My face was just like lagging really quick, and so was yours. And it looked like we were glitching out.
Hmm.
But the
Okay,
internet.
now you look great to me.
Okay. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm here for.
Yep. The emotional support. It's
Yeah, that's what
fantastic.
I do, baby.
Hmm. When What was the last project that you were on that you felt like you did the best job on? Because I know you did two recent ones, and I just
Hmm.
talked to Joe about his film Squalor, which
Oh yeah, yeah,
I
that should be
remember. I think
fun.
I recall you DP'd, and then you did another one called Rewritten. Can you tell me about the
Hmm.
contrast between those two projects and what you did differently in terms of your role?
Yeah, yeah. So between those two projects, Rewritten is for winter film, and then Squalor is just a fun project with a bunch of my friends. Um, so I'd say Squalor was a lot more organized. Obviously, we had more time to kind of put it together,
Sure.
um, but it was also a lot more complicated compared to Rewritten because Rewritten was like two locations and not as many pages. Um, yeah, so Squalor, I had my friends with me, and I had people in all the positions that I wanted, and it makes it a lot easier to just focus on what I want to do with the camera and the lighting and all that stuff because I'm strictly just staying by the camera,
Mm.
and I don't have to worry about going and helping people with a bunch of different stuff, which is cool. And then going to Rewritten, where a bunch of random, extenuating circumstances meant that we only had like two lights to work with, and um, people not having people to fill the positions because of things like weather and stuff like that.
It's
So
48 hours winter film, right? Is that what it is?
uh, no, no, it's you get the month of March, is it? I think you get the month of March to write, shoot, edit, and deliver.
Okay.
And and yeah, yeah. So that one. that one almost fell apart before it even shot, and fortunately, um, Alex, the director, and Jay, they made it work and got us all to Columbus, and we made it happen.
Hmm.
But that one was definitely like more of a, I guess, run and gun, fly by the seat of your pants type of shoot,
Sure.
which is kind of
To
fun.
backtrack a bit, what do you think is missing from indie writing on the filmmaking?
Um, I guess I feel like a lot of indie writing is just very, very tropey. And to me, kind of feels like a lot of times people are just trying to get through a story rather than trying to come up with something original and compelling. Not always. I mean, this is just like
Do you
something
feel like a
I've
lot of indie
seen.
filmmaking just tries to mimic like A24 and like make something controversial or stimulating,
Yeah,
but not necessarily anything that you could emotionally yourself attach yourself to?
yeah. I feel like a lot of it is just kind of copying and not as much trying to do something new. Like you might, like a director or writer might see something or have a story that they really love, and so like, well, I want to make something like that. And
Mm.
so instead of just coming up with something that kind of hits on some of the themes of this other thing, they're like, I just want to do this, and we'll just change it a little bit.
Do you think
And
that the
I feel like
indie
that doesn't
filmmaking
work.
market is sort of flooded with too many movie nerds and not enough filmmakers?
I think that's definitely a possibility. And I also want to say, don't want this to be like super, super negative because there's a lot of people out there that are also making like awesome stuff. It's really cool.
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, this is just I'm just talking about the whole negative part of it. But yeah.
Well, I mean, contrast is important, though. You know, I think
Hmm.
there's, and I've mentioned this before, is actually like there's too much ball fondling that goes on. You know, and it's like, oh, I really want to work on your project, or
Yeah.
like Chase Crawford, you know, who's local, and he has his own
Yeah, I
thing
worked with
going.
Chase.
You've worked with Chase?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, okay, cool. Well, it is a small world. Well, especially
it
when I'm
is.
interviewing people from the same community. I can only
Right.
imagine how many unsolicited scripts that man gets, and
Probably
how
a
much
lot.
ball fondling. And people are like, "You want to give me some money?" You know.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, yeah, you're right. There's some negative aspects to it, but what do you think could be improved on in the indie scene when it comes to the social dynamics of it that might make it better?
That social, as far as like the social dynamics go,
Yeah,
hmm,
because right now
that's
at the
tough.
moment it's kind of like there's a lot of pockets, a lot of groups,
Hmm.
and it seems to me that sometimes it's a little too clicky,
Hmm.
you know. But
Yeah.
on the other side, it's like you know, if you've made movies with your friends before, um, you want to make movies again with your friends, you know. And so there's a natural
Right.
element to it that like there's not that's not a negative thing to want to make films with your friends, but if uh, the biggest complaint I hear for indie filmmakers is actually that you know there's no funding to go around for these big projects that we all want to do. And I think one of the
Hmm.
things that's actually holding that back is that there's not like one congealed identity in the indie filmmaking community because it's all fragmented and a little bit more pocketed and sometimes clicky. And I've tried to think of ways like that maybe there's a way to congeal everything together. One positive element would be like you know the Catalano Film Festival with Johnny. You know
Hmm.
he's doing something that's local, that people can kind of aggregate together and you know be a part of that is specifically for the community. You know, but he is you know growing it, and I talked to him about that on the podcast, and you know he's got some plans that he's working on. So that is one element. But I was curious, as your perspective on a DP, you know, from your level, what if there's anything that you noticed?
I mean, obviously, there's the stuff where people always want to work with their friends, which makes sense, especially if they do a good job. But then there's the people that pull their friends onto projects that don't do a good job and are kind of just there to dick around and hang out with their friends, which, it can be okay on, I guess, certain types of sets, but it's not always my favorite vibe because, I
Right.
mean, people are volunteering their time. If it's like a free thing, or even like with a paid thing, like everyone's there to do their job and you want to do a good job. And it's not helpful when you have people there that are just kind of dicking around. Like,
Yeah,
I
because
feel like
indie
yeah, just,
filmmaking, there's a blend between the professionalism of people who want to go up into that next level, and
mhm,
then people who are just getting into it that either haven't been on real film sets or at least film
mhm,
sets that treat everything professionally and very seriously. And
mhm.
there's got to be a way to be able to talk to those sorts of people. Or I don't know. It's just a complex problem because it
It
is one
is.
aspect that is holding it back, but it's also the really slow burning fuel that does add a little bit of life to the community, you
Hmm.
know? And there's sometimes there's people that, okay, I don't want to work with this person again. And then there's other times that, you end up seeing that person later down the road and they've become more professional. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's kind of
exactly.
like
It's hard.
indie's kind of like the fast food industry of fine dining. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's like you get
Yeah,
that
it's
one new guy in the back who doesn't know how to push the buttons right. But as time goes on, he learns to focus, and suddenly the process of producing the product becomes a little bit more streamlined.
and I want to say like I'm not necessarily talking about as much like incompetence or or ignorance, like not knowing how to do stuff. If someone is on the set and they don't know how to do stuff, like I feel like that's okay to a certain extent, as long as they're trying and willing to learn. I more so don't like when it's people who are just kind of there to hang out and don't really have any inclination
Yeah,
to try the project.
it's another person to move equipment around, or might bump a light pole.
Yeah, yeah. So it's yeah, that type of vibe I don't like as much. But if someone like just doesn't know stuff and is trying to learn and trying to work, then I can respect that a lot.
To
Because
date,
I've been that person.
right? I mean, well, everyone starts somewhere, though.
Yeah,
Especially when
yeah,
they're first getting
exactly.
involved. Um, Other than to pivot away from like talking about red flags and the negative aspect, what has been your most positive set experience, and what did you learn from that project
Ooh, most positive set experience.
to date?
Hmm.
Because I'm
To
sure there's a
date.
couple that are like, that was fun, but
Hmm.
maybe there was another one that was also fun, but it turned out a lot better, for so there's
Okay.
a lot of variables to consider. So I don't
And
blame
is this sets that I've DP'd on or
you.
like
That you've DP'd, yeah, because
okay.
you were more in charge of the variables underneath your control.
Right, 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 right. Hmm. I will say
This is a gotcha question to pick favorites
yeah,
because I know it's like
it's
some people are.
hard, yeah. Yeah, this is a tough one. Okay. My most positive set experience. Okay, I'll say it was probably Squalor, maybe. Yeah, that one was just great because stuff was working and I was pretty happy with the shots I was getting and everyone was kind of working together very smoothly. And I had
Hmm.
all my friends around me and all of them were working hard and doing a great job and then you just kind of get that feeling when you're in the middle of it all. It's like, wow, this is so cool. Like the fact that I'm getting to do this with all my
Hmm.
friends and it looks like it's coming together pretty well.
From
So
what
that
I've
was
heard from that, because I talked to Joe about it, it is Joe's
mhm.
project.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
there's it
I'm
might
Joe.
end up being, it might end up being a good example of what a project, uh, a project that would appear after in the film community, a long filtering process of people who are one competent,
Hmm.
professional, and are trying to reach that next level. You know,
Hmm.
because I'm aware of all the people who are on that film set,
Hmm.
and they're all very very passionate about what they do, and they're at least very decent at what they do. And there's not necessarily bad apple, but Joe's produced a lot of short films, and so he's met a
Right.
lot of people. And this being his most recent project, you can kind of see. I think what we're going to end up seeing is the results of how indie filmmaking eventually bubbles up to,
Hmm.
in the positive way. Um, how would you contrast that with like a festival film, like rewritten, where it's very specific and not
Hmm.
necessarily, I mean, not saying it's not a passion project, but you're doing it for a competition and not doing it for yourself. And so there's a more personal aspect to it that maybe festival competitions don't necessarily pull out of creatives.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'd say I guess comparing them. Mm, yeah, I mean, Squalor felt different compared to, Rewritten, just for the fact that I knew this was a project that, uh, speaking about Squalor, I knew Squalor was something that Joe cared about a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I care about a lot, and most of the people working on it seem to care about it. But I feel like you don't, it's not as personal, I guess, like you're saying, when it comes to something like winter film, where you're kind of given certain stuff you have to include. Like there's still a level of, still like a personal level to it, but slightly less because it's not just a project that is solely coming from a person who really cares about it. I'm like trying to say this in a way that doesn't like it doesn't
Call
come off
anybody out specifically.
the wrong way. Like I'm not saying that those types of projects aren't personal or don't mean a lot, because they can, and they can do cool stuff for your career and for, maybe the people you get to work with.
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely does feel different, I feel like. Maybe
What's an
different
aspect of cinematography that you feel you want to improve on the most, that you think you'll benefit from the most?
camera movement. That's the big one.
Dynamic
Trying to
setups.
get trying to get more of a feel for. Mainly just like motivated camera movement, knowing when and why to move the camera and how I want it to move. And, you know, for example, knowing when it's going to be worth it to take the time to get a camera on a gimbal, because that's a big time sink, is dealing with something like that,
Yeah,
which
it
I
takes
think
a
the best.
gimbal like 20, 30 minutes to set up and calibrate or something like that.
Yeah, it's a lot. So I think the best thing to do for that is just having a camera already set up on a gimbal to save time. But
Hmm.
I'll not go into all that too much. But yeah, camera movement is the big one I'm working on figuring out more.
Hmm. When a director is blocking the actors in the shot, how often do you find yourself trying to make something that's not working for you visually look better versus using your skills to complement something that already works well? Because there's a little bit of a trade-off sometimes, you know.
Hmm. All right, say that one again. Sorry. Just
When a director is blocking the actors in the shot, how often do you find yourself trying to make something that's not working work because it's what the director wants, and you're trying to serve his
mm-hmm.
vision, versus, suggesting something else that you think will end up looking visually better, versus, maybe that's not what the director's going for. There's a little bit
Yeah,
of
I
a
think.
struggle between those two things, of
Mhm.
what you think is going to work as a DP and what the director is trying to accomplish with how he's moving the camera, the actors through the shot.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I that's definitely something I see myself kind of having a little bit of a struggle with, um, going between what I want and what the director wants. And I'm usually very quick to kind of explain if something's not working for me or if I want to change it. But if it's like a situation where we're already like really behind on time, and we're gonna lose this location in like an hour or two, and we got to get through this, then I might just concede it and be like, okay, this is gonna be what you're saying to do, even though it's not gonna look the best. It's what we can make happen right now. So sometimes
Hmm.
you just gotta
How
accept
often
it.
do you feel that time ends up cutting into what you want to actually do?
I feel like I feel like it's always sort of a pressing matter, especially with the way like low budget stuff can be scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
That definitely can be something that detracts a little bit from what you can do, because obviously with more time you can make stuff prettier. You can add stuff in that you might not be able to if you don't have time. So I feel like it's always kind of like a pressing matter that'll decide how much you can do.
And the prep work is also a big factor. You know, when you see
Oh
a
yeah,
project that they
definitely.
know they're putting a lot of time into pre-production, you know, that gives you a lot
Hmm.
of confidence going into the project of like, okay, now that we have at least a game plan for everything, we have a little bit more flexibility for maybe trying something else on the spot, or if something goes wrong, then we have the time to actually be able to adapt, you know.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure.
Hmm. What makes a project right for you to join?
Let's say just having an interesting script is is like probably the number one, or something that I know that I can make visually interesting.
Hmm.
Like if I was sent a script and it's something I don't understand, that's also a big one. I need to understand it. Because if I don't understand it
You got to
and
know
can't,
what's going on because indie
yeah,
filmmakers
if I
like to
can't
be a
picture
little
it,
bit too abstract with oh, it could mean several different things and there's an
hmm
interpretation. It's all about what the audience takes away, you know. There is a frou-frou aspect to, you know, indie filmmaking.
hmm yeah, I uh, was on a project basically, and then I kind of just had to leave it because I just couldn't understand what they're trying to do with the script. And then I was presented with all these logistical nightmare issues, and that made me realize, okay, this is a project I don't think I should be a part of because I don't think I can add anything to this. And I
Mm.
think it ultimately won't be productive for me to spend a lot of time on this when I could be spending time on a project that I understand and think I can add a lot of value to. And that's
Which do you think
hard.
speaks more volumes, the people behind it or the script when you're first looking at it?
Ooh, that's a good question. Because if you're getting something from someone you care about as like a friend and respect,
Hmm.
then that might convince me to also, that's like a situation where I feel like you can talk to them about things in the script that aren't working as well
Because that
and
trust
maybe
is
give them
there.
some advice. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Whereas if someone's just kind of like throwing out a script to you who you don't know, and you read that script and it's bad, you don't really feel as much in a position where you can give them advice because they're not looking for that. They're just looking for you to say yes or no.
Hmm. What genre of movie have you learned the most about when it comes to cinematography and shot setup?
Mm, I guess probably like thriller stuff is what I've learned the most about, I guess. But I mean,
Because
there's
of the
overlap
suspense
between
and
different
the push
stuff.
and pull.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I feel
Hmm.
like that's probably what I've learned the most about.
What kind of film makes you emotional?
Emotional. Like genre, or
What type
are
of
you looking for
story?
like specific a type of story? Um, I guess I love a good mentor-mentee relationship in a
Hmm.
in a film. Also, I'm a big reader, so that kind of crosses over into books I like as well.
That adds to the
Um,
scrutiny of like, okay, what is good writing? You know, when you're
yeah,
reading a
yeah,
script, yeah.
yeah. So, um, yeah, something with a good mentor-mentee relationship, and then of course, in a lot of those, the mentor ends up distanced or gone in some manner, whether they like die, or there's always something there after the mentee has learned all they need to learn or whatever.
Yeah. Has there ever been a project that drained you of your passion to the point where you questioned whether or not to continue?
Oh, what a great question. Yes, yes, there has. I'm not going to name what it was, um,
Why'd you decide
but
to continue after it?
I thought it can't get much worse than this. So, so
You
I
thought
get
you'd
to
seen
talk
it all and be like,
uphill, or
if this is the worst, I can handle it, you know?
yeah, yeah. I'm like, well, I made it through, and stuff's probably not going to be as bad as that going forward. So we're good. We're chilling. Like, yeah,
What makes
yeah,
film
good
worth all the
question.
headaches and the heartbreaks?
Getting together with your friends and watching something you made and having it received in a great way is a very, very good feeling. Very satisfying. And you're like, it's also kind of reaffirms that you're learning and doing a good job. And I think that's important, is having, like, I'm a very progress oriented person.
Very future
Um,
minded.
yeah, like I always am insistent to myself about being better and better and better, and that's hard,
What
but
project do you feel like
it
you improved
pushes
the
me.
most on?
Like between two projects, which one was the best jump
To date.
to date? Like the best project or the best change in quality?
The largest leap in terms of your
Mhm.
abilities.
Okay. Yeah, I would say between my first film and my second film, the first one I did not do a good job on. It was bad. Of course, it's always bad the first thing you shoot.
Right. It's a rite of
Uh,
passage. You got to make a bad film, you know?
yeah, and then you're like, wow, I guess I really don't know that much. I guess I just got to get better. But yeah, between the very first one I made and the second one I made, which is the horror film Never Alone, um, that I made a fright film.
Hmm.
Um,
What were your
yeah, that was the
takeaways
big.
and the lessons that you learned from the largest production you've been a part on to date?
Okay. The largest production I've been a part of was, well, I don't know if hmm, we we counting, I guess we're probably counting features in this, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So Control Freak just came out recently on Hulu, which shot here in uh, Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky. That one, I was like all I did on that was I day played second AC for a few days and then chatted with the DP. But I got to learn a lot from that about how bigger sets operate because everything is just like nailed down to a T in the most efficient way possible.
Hmm.
And I think that was very interesting to see for me, like watching how smoothly everything worked with everyone. And
Hmm.
you have main camera and talent and stuff all filming in one room, filming a scene with two cameras. And then you have like a splinter unit off to the side shooting all this montage stuff in another room, all of it shooting together at the same time to
Okay, so
be a
they were
really
running in tandem.
yeah, yeah. So I thought like that wasn't even something that I'd considered really at that time, is like having different teams of people shooting at the same time, and I thought that
Hmm.
was really cool. And
How big was the camera unit for that?
like how many people?
Yeah, how many people?
Okay. Good question. I don't know. It was a good amount of people. I mean, A cam first, second, B cam first, second, splinter unit stuff, and then obviously second unit DP, and then operators. A fair amount of people, more than I had seen, but I'm not sure what the exact number is.
Okay. What genre of movie that you think you haven't done that you have some skills that you think would shine in that haven't been seen yet?
Hmm. I think I'd like to do like a drama of some sort. I don't know,
Hmm.
or a dramedy, maybe. Not necessarily like I don't know if you've seen the show The End of the Fucking World.
I've seen clips from it. I haven't seen the show though.
It's one of my favorite shows of all time, and it was so good that I was like, wow, like what a great story and the way it was shot. Like I've done like so many hours of research on that show, listened to all the podcasts, interviews, just like everything I could find about it, just because it was like intrigued me so much because it was shot in a really simple way that somehow just worked. It was so good. I'm like, I don't know how you can make like do something in such a simple way, but it worked perfectly for the project.
Hmm.
It was just something that made me consider like you can shoot dramas in a way that's interesting and compelling. And
Do you
I
think
like,
indie filmmakers should try doing more drama instead of quirky stuff?
yeah, I think there's value in doing like all different types of genres.
Hmm. Well, what
Oops.
what are you looking forward to most in terms of your career and where you're trying to take it?
Like upcoming projects or as far as like things I want to do in the future?
Both.
Both. Upcoming projects. Let's see. There's I get to shoot some commercial stuff in Lexington coming up in May, so that should be pretty cool.
Hmm.
I get to do a bunch of different setups and just try some stuff out. And so I'm excited to get to do that and get paid to kind of experiment with stuff. That'll be
Keyword
fun.
get paid.
Yeah, get paid. Um, let's see. And then there's, let's see. And I guess in the future, I'm also excited about the prospect of shooting my first feature whenever that occurs. I mean, there's been talks with people about stuff, but
Yeah,
don't
indie
know anything
filmmakers
for
like
sure.
to talk. They do like to
Oh
talk
yeah,
about. They like to
everyone
talk
loves
about
to
it.
talk,
Everybody likes to talk.
but yeah. But
Um,
then also, I get to gaff my first feature all the way through um, for Ben McLean. Ben, he probably talked about that feature he has
okay.
coming up. So I'll be with him for and with a bunch of my other friends who are working on it for a
Oh
few
yeah,
weeks.
Ben. I remember he told me about that. Like, cause he recently
Hmm.
had a newborn baby,
Hmm.
and he was talking about like, oh, I got this feature, man, and then I got a newborn. I don't know how I'm gonna balance it out. And I think it didn't it get like pushed off slightly
Yeah,
more.
yeah, yeah. So it was supposed to be in April, but now we're shooting in July.
Okay.
Um,
Can you tell
but
me
yeah,
anything about that project?
I don't know what what I'm allowed to talk about with it, so I'll probably try to stay very, very general.
What have the
But
conversations been like with Ben about the project in terms of how to approach it creatively?
so we shot the short to get funding for the feature sometime last year. I think maybe it was like March or something.
Okay.
Um, but the way we did things then has informed, I think, the way we're going to do things coming up. And
Mm-hmm.
we haven't uh, dove into it too much, but there's, I mean, obviously talking about things like what types of locations we're going to be looking at, um, and then obviously all the equipment we're working with, and possibilities of rentals of stuff. But
Right.
yeah, just like that sort of stuff. And then obviously coming up will come lighting diagrams and actually getting to see some of the locations.
How have you learned how to balance, if you have learned to balance, or what balance have you found in terms of managing your personal life versus your aspirational ambitions?
Gotcha. Yeah, good question. Um, yeah, there's definitely things that are hard to balance, like missing stuff with uh, events and things with my wife because I get an opportunity that pops up and I'm like, hey, this is a cool thing that I have the possibility to do, but it means I have to miss this, this, and this. But
Hmm.
I'm getting paid too, so there's that.
Money
And
justifies a lot of things.
it does, like I was came up on a commercial with Chase actually in Miami,
Okay.
but that was over top of some other stuff I had plans to do with my wife, and so I was like, hey, this is a very cool opportunity, and I want to do it. And she's very, very supportive, so she was all about it. She was like, yeah, go do that. That's awesome. Like you're gonna have so much fun, and I'm sure you'll do a great job. She's very supportive, but there's also a little bit of tension sometimes where I'm like, hey, I know I promised that I'd do this thing, but I had this pop up, and obviously I want to keep continuing my career. And you want to take every job that you get offered,
Sure.
paying or otherwise. Like if someone, like one of your friends offers you a cool project to work on, or says they need help, you want to help them because like
Right.
obviously there's that give and take where you help your friends and they help you, and we're all kind of just growing together.
Hmm. What's been the most fulfilling thing for you so far in your career?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
What's been the most fulfilling aspect of filmmaking for you so far in your career?
Honestly, is the most fulfilling thing I guess would be working with my friends and getting to meet new people and make cool stuff, like that's awesome. Like it's so cool, especially when you like really click with a new group of people
Mm.
and you get to expand that network, and now you have another connection, another friend that knows exactly the types of struggles you're going through in your career. And yeah, just I guess the connections are very important to me and very fulfilling to work with new people and friends and make cool stuff. Like that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, Joe, it's been great getting to talk to you. Sorry about those internet connections. That's something that's
No,
just
you're
it
good. Don't even
happens.
worry about it.
Do you
Yeah,
have any
no,
final
this has been
thoughts you want to
fun.
leave for the audience?
Um,
Any words of wisdom you want to pull out of Socrates out of your butt?
yeah.
Anybody you want to call out?
Yeah, you just keep shooting stuff, I guess. I don't know. I feel like I don't have too much great advice that hasn't already been said by a million people. But yeah, just keep shooting stuff. That's the key to growing, I think.
All right. Well, Joe, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yeah. Yep. See you around.
All right, I'll see you.